Just a
Okay.
few words as we start. So, welcome to the webinar, A Day in the Life of a Web Developer, where you will get to hear from experienced developers from across sectors as they share stories, insight, tips, and more about the profession. My name is Ria, and I'm going to be the moderator for this session. And I would like to begin with the land acknowledgement. McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose presence marked this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. And now just some housekeeping. So you can ask questions in the chat and we will compile them for a Q&A at the end of session. And this session is being recorded as mentioned by Jacques. So for today, Jacques who is a faculty lecturer and a program coordinator for this program, will be leading the session. He has a master's in computer science and is a former Google software engineer and the former head of education at Concordia Bootcamp. He is also the creator of Wakata.io and the co-creator of lingoracer.com. Our panelists are Ziad Saab, who is a senior full stack developer and who works in freelance, Stephanie Saretsky, who is a full stack developer who works for Transit, Nadim Islam, who is a senior software engineer at Aptible, Ali Margaret Newman, who is chief technology officer at Inditech, and Ksenia Nadkina, who is a web developer at Nectar Technologies. So I'll let Jacques take the lead from here.
Thank you for the great introduction, Ria, and thank you all for taking time to come and learn about full stack development. I'm very excited to talk about my career and what I do. Well, I mean, I'm an instructor, but I do full stack development in my free time. And I'm also all very excited to hear my colleagues and my former students and my friends, all of them are my friends now, talk about how they feel about full stack development, what they do, and how they got to where they are, and how they see things happening in the future. So to start, I'm going to start things off with a bang, and I'm going to introduce Ali Margaret Newman. So Ali, very, very interesting, is the lead singer for a band called Old Time Honey, which I actually really like. And in fact, I put their sticker on my laptop. After going through my training, she went on to become a chief technology officer at Inditech. So Ali, would you like to talk a little bit about your company and what projects you're working on?
Sure, yeah. So that was a really, really scary promotion. There was like, basically, there's a woman named Sophia, and she has this really brilliant idea. So she kept taking it around to different architects, and the last one that she was working with, has been working with banks for 20 years, and this brilliant guy, but he couldn't seem to like pull the idea out of her head. So I learned about domain-driven design, and together we figured out exactly what her project would be. And then she was like, well, you're the CTO now. And I was like, oh God. So yeah, it's been definitely a strange journey, but I love it so much. And like, yeah, we're basically building, I can't talk too much about it because it's secret, but we're building a B2B SaaS application that's going to help use machine learning and AI to kind of level the playing field for consultants and consulting firm hiring.
Very cool.
It's cool. I like it.
Thank you for sharing that, Ali. Next off, we have Ksenia Nadkina. I've never actually pronounced your last name, Ksenia, and I hope I did it correctly.
It's okay.
So you were an engineer before going through my training program, not a software engineer, the other kind of engineer.
Yeah, the less important.
Debatable. I'm sure there are audience members in the
less important for this meeting.
For this meeting, less relevant for this meeting. You are now a web developer for Nectar Technologies.
Yep.
Would you like to talk a little bit about your company and what projects you're working on?
Yeah, indeed. No secrets here. I'm like like in others, we actually can talk about our products. So yeah, I studied chemical engineering, and I worked as an automation engineer for a couple of years before going through Jacques' program, and then I sort of, going from a very corporate environment where, there's like levels of layers of management, one on top of another. I said, okay, this is being in software is kind of a place where you can choose the industry where you want to work, and and choose kind of like the mode of work. So I've been working a lot with startups. I found that it's kind of the work style that I enjoy the most. And after finishing Jacques' program, I was working for a small startup, just being one of the 3-person team. And we were developing transportation solutions for so aimed at people with reduced mobility. After that job, I started with Nectar Technology, the company that I work for right now. And Nectar is a great company, local Montreal company that helps beekeepers raise healthier bees through hardware, through software, through AI, and I work as a web software developer for one of their main products.
Very cool. Next on the list, we have Nadim Islam. Now, Nadim is an experienced full stack developer with over 5 years of work experience, has a bachelor's in software engineering. He's now a software engineer at Aptible. So Nadim, would you care to talk a little bit about your company and what projects you're working on?
Yeah, I think someone mentioned this in the talk previously, is like once you get out of software, you can kind of be in a lot of different sectors. And for me, this wasn't purposefully, but I ended up in a lot of fintech sector. So I worked in a few companies, basically working in the trading system, trading software. And eventually right now, the company I'm working for is mostly in legal tech. So we're building automation for compliance. It's a lot of jargon. It may sound like a lot of jargon, but at the end of the day, it's a SaaS, B2B SaaS product. And I think Jose, like I think I hear
Jose,
sound feedback.
Mute yourself, please.
And yeah, so basically a lot of companies right now need certifications. If you've heard anything about GDPR recently, like a few years back, where all the European companies are required to have GDPR to basically to acquire users, we kind of automate a lot of that processes. And yeah, there's a lot of newer blockchain tech companies are also coming towards this direction. So as startups try to get into these type of really regulated sectors, they need to acquire these certification, and it's very difficult for a small company to get into that. Back in the day, like even right now, like if you want to get a consultant like that, you end up paying about $100K just for the consultant to come into your office for like 3 months, whereas our product is like for startups like a 10K a year just to automate that whole process. So that helps a lot of startups, and right now we're kind of moving into more the enterprise sector. It's a fully remote company, has been remote 7 years. I've been working there for about 2 years now.
It's always nice to work remotely. I mean, everyone is doing it nowadays, but you were doing it before. You were doing it before it was cool. You're the hipster.
Exactly. Yeah. At some point, I realized like I want to kind of like be traveling a bit while I'm working. So like right now I'm in Vancouver. I've been here for about 2 months now. So I'm working. This is an Airbnb, so I'm working from here. Yeah, that's very convenient. That's another advantage, I guess, of being like the only tool you need is a keyboard and a screen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you become experienced as a dev, you can work remotely. You can travel the world. I know people who worked from Thailand and who were riding elephants during the day and coding at night. It's a world of possibilities, right? You become Aladdin. That's what becoming a web developer gives you. It gives you a magic carpet. You can go anywhere, and as long as you bring your computer, you can earn a living.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Nadim. Next, we have Stephanie Saretsky. Interestingly enough, Stephanie was a marketing manager before going through my training program, and now she's a full stack developer at Transit. So Stephanie, would you care to talk a little bit about your company and what projects you're working on?
Hi, yeah, for sure. So I work at Transit. It's a mobile app for taking public transportation. It also includes trip planning with services like Bixi or Communauto. It's great. I definitely recommend it. But I am on our static team. So I'm working on a small team within the company that is kind of outside of web development and the mobile app itself, but we work with the data that we receive from public transportation agencies, making sure that the data is formatted and cleaned correctly to display perfectly within the mobile app itself, and then creating visualizations for that data so that our teams internally can work with it. So creating dashboards and UIs for internal use. And I've been there for about 2 years now, almost.
Very cool. Next off, we have Ziad. So Ziad has over 10 years of experience as a full stack developer. This guy is the OG of full stack development, the bachelor's in computer science, and forever a freelancer. Ziad knows everything about traveling and working. He's been all over the place. Ziad, would you care to talk a little bit about any interesting things you're working on? Or if it's secret, you could just say, Jack, it's a secret.
I can't talk about the projects that I'm working on, but so what I like about freelancing is that I get to do a lot of things, and like a lot of things at the same time. So I don't like have like, say, 1 week where I'm doing the same thing all week. I think to me that's important. And so I do mentoring. I do like one-on-one mentoring. I do training. I'm also building a course that I would like to publish by the end of the winter on modern technologies like React, Firebase, and all that. And I also do freelance projects that I can't talk about what they are, but they revolve around building custom software, usually internal software. And it's really fun. I love everything that I do. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, you definitely live a very interesting life, Ziad. I'm very jealous of you and your travels and all the fun stuff you're doing. So, thanks for sharing. We're going to circle back to you. We're going to go panelist by panelist, and I'll be asking questions. And we will learn all about our wonderful panelists today, which are such great people, and that's why I chose them. So, a question for Ali. So Ali, you were a full-time musician before becoming a full-stack developer, before becoming a CTO. Could you talk a little bit about how your life changed in this transition? Because these are very different careers.
Yeah, they're very different. And I mean, that's why I chose coding in the first place, because I was touring a lot and there's so much time you're in the van. There's so much time you're waiting 4 hours after your sound check with nothing to do. And I was like, I should be doing something right now. And that's where I got the idea to learn development. But yeah, I didn't really start doing development full time till about a year ago. And it's changed drastically. I don't know, it's very different. Like I feel like I get to live a much more balanced life. You know, like you can really, even if you have to work a certain amount of hours a week or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, like you can do 12 hours in one day and then 4 the next day. You know, like it's your own time, you're scheduling yourself. So there's like that freedom of schedule, which is just so nice. And I mean, of course, the jobs pay well. So that's really nice too. You know, like for the first time in my life, I'm like, I could actually afford a house in the future. And I've never had that thought before. You know? So yeah, stability, feeling healthier, more balanced. It is so interesting too. Like I think what happened with me, I love music, I always will. I'm also an audio engineer. I'm actually doing a year-long project for Canada Council right now, producing music videos. But yeah, like web development, it's so much more interesting than music, and that blew me away. Like I thought I was trying to learn something to make some side money while I was doing music, but it turned out I actually really like development better. And it's incredibly creative. That's what I find. I see a lot of musicians actually really end up loving coding. And I do think it's because it's a very creative process that happens over time and its coordinations. Very similar.
There's definitely some parallels, and musicians have the work ethic to make it happen. I think that's pretty important too.
Because we like sitting alone and focusing.
Focus, that's so important. Absolutely. So let's move on to Ksenia. Now, Ksenia, I've had many conversations with you, and one theme that keeps reappearing is your love of making the world a better place. You want to have a positive impact on the world. And in fact, from what I understand, this is also an important factor for you when you chose your employer, and you are making the life better for bees, and bees are making the life better for us. So everyone wins. Can you describe how web development lets you have a positive impact on the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jacques. Yeah, you know, I've spent a couple of years working in Alberta, and inevitably, when you work in Alberta, you somehow work in environmentalist. I always found that super soul crushing, and so that role.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ksenia. I didn't quite hear that. What did you just say about environment?
Yeah. So I was. So I was working in a kind of an oil and gas related field, and had an opportunity and decided to transition to software development. So I felt like I wanted to do something that's like not as just something positive for the planet. Yeah, being a web developer, knowing how to make software has really given me like a really wide range of opportunities and career choices. Like I could work in the medical industry, I can work in transportation. You know, I can work with the niche. I can work with bees, or I can work with farmers. So this like variety of choices is very cool, and it's very empowering.
Very nice. I'm glad there are people like you, Ksenia, to make the world, because there's so many people who are not making the world a better place. So you guys, the Ksenias of the world, is what lets the planet live and for us to be happy. Thank you, Ksenia.
Oh, it's too much, but thank you.
Moving on to Nadim. So Nadim, you're very experienced. You're a very disciplined software engineer. And I'm sure you've learned many things over your journey to where you are today. So if you could go back to when you just started learning full stack development, web development, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give yourself? I'm putting you on the spot here, Nadim.
Yeah, myself. I mean, if I had the knowledge of today, like, I mean, go back and buy a lot of crypto, but that's another topic altogether. But one of the things I can actually talk about, well, first of all, if I could go back, I wish I had started programming as I was a kid. I did not. I started in university. Like, I think the earlier you start it, the easier it is to grasp like harder concepts later on. But once I started in university, it was still very difficult to do anything like productive wise. So I realized after doing 1 year of like software engineering, like I was no further along than I was in the beginning. It's a lot of concepts, a lot of theories, but I wasn't really like actually grasping anything I would be actually being creative on. So at some point, my friend at that time showed me this website he was running. He was making passive income on the side, and I was hooked. Like, how are you making money? You're just a student. Like, we're working full. Like, we're both studying the same thing, but you're making money on the side, and I'm not. So it was this like he was like scraping off anime videos, and he was posting it on a website, and he was making like passive ad income on there. One thing that was nice for us back then, I think, web development was a lot more nascent. Nascent in the sense like there was only two choices you could make. You either have Linux and you'd build on LAMP, if those of you who are aware of it, LAMP, or like you'd build on WAMP if you're on Windows, which is like Windows, Apache, MySQL, PostgreSQL. Like, so you didn't have like all these like modern frameworks and everything like that. So like, I guess back then, like I wish I was taking up like I was taking guidance from someone to like reach out to a guidance of someone who's already a very good web developer to just like get that knowledge through really fast. Just at least build my curriculum to learn that. And I wish I had started that as I was starting university. Like university was giving me a lot of like theoretical courses, but it wasn't really giving me actual hands-on experience. And to be honest, like I only learned a lot of the hands-on experience by the time I got to a job. I gave up on that project of making passive income. I wish I had gone further off, but and I think the hardest part is really having someone tell you like, just focus on this and focus on that. Just don't get distracted with everything. And I think that problem is even harder nowadays. Like there's just so much technologies out there, so much information. Like you go on YouTube and there's like a million frameworks for you to learn, and just like it's very hard for you to just keep focus and knowing what to do. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get distracted, and it's so easy to start learning a million different things. You raise a very good point. It's really important to have someone to guide you. Just so happens that that's what instructors do, and I just so happen to be an instructor. So thank you, Nadim, for selling me. Very much appreciated. This was not staged at all. Moving on to Stephanie. So Stephanie, you shared a very interesting story of how you built a game early on in your journey to becoming a developer. So is that what got you interested in web development? And when did you know that you wanted to make what you do a career?
Yeah, so it was kind of a serendipitous occasion, I guess, because before I made the jump, I was working at a B2B marketing company called Unbounce. It's a landing page builder. And I was the multimedia producer, so taking care of all of the podcasting, video content, things like that. But they shut down their Montreal office, so I got laid off. But up until then, I was kind of, feeling like I was done with the marketing side of things, and kind of before, like referencing what Ali had said about music and audio, it's kind of a similar headspace to get into. So I was actually more interested in game development, and I was accepted into a game development workshop called Pixels here in Montreal. So it's for women to develop their first video game. So it was about 2 months long, and I made a video game and I was hooked. But during that mentorship program, someone within the program reached out to me about a job at a game development co-working studio here in Montreal called Gameplay Space. It's a co-working space for indie developers, and they were looking for a marketing manager. And so I thought, okay, maybe I could do the marketing thing still, but within the game industry, and maybe that would kind of scratch the itch, so to speak. But I did that for a year, and while I enjoyed it, it just really wasn't what I wanted to do. And when I was researching, game dev versus web dev was just so much more accessible to me as someone who, was turning 30, had already put 10 years into a career. I did not want to be spending 2 to 4 years full time, or there was a night school at Dawson. 2 years of night school was not ideal. And especially, the working conditions in the game industry is definitely not as great as it is in tech, which is something I was already used to. So that was really important to me, a work-life balance and good benefits and things like that. So after doing all my research, I decided that web dev was the best field to go into. And while you may not get the same amount of kind of endorphins as you do potentially when you fix a bug in a game, it's like still on a similar level. And I'm really happy I made the choice.
Very cool. So yeah, so when you fix a bug, when you fix your own mistake, it's a mixture of endorphins and oh my God, I can't believe I made the mistake. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
pardon me?
No, I was going to say, especially if it's a really silly mistake that's been there for maybe half the day and you're,
What gets me every time is every time I'm hunting a bug, I think to myself, I will learn something important when I fix this bug. And it always ends up being a stupid mistake on my part.
oh
And
yeah.
there's no learning that happened. So,
Last week I was testing a bug and I just couldn't figure out, I knew my code was working, and I realized that after 3 hours I had been testing it on the production site and not on the local site. So that's why my change hadn't worked. So
oh my God, I've done
Yeah,
that so many times.
great
I
things
keep
like that.
doing it, yeah. Next off, we have Ziad. So you're basically the Yoda of this session. So I'm going to ask you, as our Yoda, to kind of tell us how you Ziad, are you there?
Jacques, your sound cut out for a second. As a web developer, I want you to tell us how
you see things changing in the field or staying the same. So do you see yourself doing the same thing for the next 10 years? Or do you see there's going to be changes and things will be done differently?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes, and I love I like what some other people said about like writing code and fixing bugs and all that. I think it's really fun. I enjoy doing software development, but some of the times when I felt the most rewarded was when a potential client would come to me for solving a certain problem that they were having, and because they knew that I was doing software development, but when I would be able to solve their problem without writing any code. And it sounds a bit weird at first, like you're a freelance guy, right? So you kind of like you depend on contracts, and to kind of reject potentially like some good work. But I think that it's been a really good thing for me in the past. I've even had a few people come back to me after a few months after being provided some solutions that didn't involve any software development, and allowed them to kind of test their assumptions and test their product without spending a lot of money, like just a few dollars a month, if any, using things like Airtable or other software like that. And it's a little bit an intro to answer the question that you asked. I've been doing a lot of poking into low code and no code platforms, and I think that there's some future there to be able to do some things with trade-offs. Of course, everything that we do has a trade-off. But I think also that sometimes we spend a lot of time like on our code, and we want to make it nice and all that, and I think that's important. But at the same time, I also think that every line of code that I write is more of a liability than like, there is value provided, but it's like the more code there is, and the more things can break. So I think that building solutions out of building blocks that are at a higher and higher level over time, generic enough, but still at a high level, is part of the future at least. So no, I don't think that things will stay the same.
Okay, we have a proponent for no code and low code. So are you saying the machines are going to take my job away?
That's exactly what I'm not saying. Because as you and I have discussed a few times at least about coding and all that, at the end of the day, it all comes down to talking to computers, like to talking the language of computers, and sort of telling them, giving them proper directions on what they do. And coding is just one of those ways of doing that. Another way could be having a visual interface where you just use your mouse to drag and drop links between things, and then it's still it's logic that you're creating like workflows, right? And this is what we're doing. And I think maybe in like 10 years we will look back and we'll say, man, like coding was such a primitive way of doing that. Like what were we doing? Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope we can find ways to automate what we do and make our lives easier. I'm a huge fan of making my life easier.
I agree. Ali has her hand raised.
Ali.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on that because, yeah, like right now, what we're doing at my company is planning this like really big serverless Azure deployment. And like, yes, it's less coding in general, but that's it. Like you start to weigh the pros and cons of like the price of a developer versus like the price of this service that's already developed per month. And yeah, the no code stuff starts to get interesting all of a sudden. That's all I wanted to say.
Financially speaking, absolutely. Automate the coder. Take our jobs away. Ali, go ahead.
I will.
Just make them more interesting, really.
Right. So we can do some more high level thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good point. We have a question from the audience, from Zach. Would anyone have any suggestions on what to learn prior to starting a full stack boot camp? This is coming from a person with no prior coding experience. Thanks. So,
I think there's something really great that, well, there's a lot of things you can do there. You can go in all directions, but I think there's some things that no matter what you're going to be coding that are going to be always the same. And so there's a book that I really like to recommend from the Pragmatic bookshelf about data structures and algorithms. And I like it because there's tons of books on the subject, but they all become a little bit too technical and they go a little bit more in depth. So I really like this this book for a few reasons. First off, because it is as pragmatic as it advertises itself to be, but also because really at the end of the day, data structures and algorithms are at the core of anything that you will be doing, both in front end and back end in anything. There's queues, there's stacks, there's operations on these things, finding the biggest value, like all these operations are really core to a lot of things that we do at every level of computing. So I'll copy paste the title of the book in the chat. That's one recommendation, and I'm sure others will have other recommendations.
if anyone else, audience or panelists, has any recommendations, please feel free to help Zach out and put it in the chat. Thank you, Ziad, for that wonderful answer. Laila asks, I'm going to actually direct this question to Nadim. Nadim, do you think that your first couple of jobs determine your career? So, and Laila specifies, I've had 2 cloud-related internships, and I'm worried it'll be difficult to get web opportunities because of it.
I don't think there's a lack of opportunities. So like there's pretty much opportunities really everywhere. So although like what I would recommend is like trying to go as variety as possible. Like if you want to do game development, go try it out. Like you might not like it, you might like it. Go if you want to work on enterprise level company, go do it. You might like it or not like it. I've never had an issue to jump from a field to one field to another. Like one thing I was sure, like I worked at a game dev company and I was like, I'm never returning there ever again. Like that's not my, I just did not like it. That was not the way I function. I worked at a more bigger company, like a massive, large corporation. I did not like it. I did not want to be. And every time I made those jumps, there was like, obviously they were like internship, but at the end of the day, then once I got into my first job, full-time job, and I was like, okay, like this is something I actually enjoy, like a smaller startup level company. And I just continued there. Obviously, the reason I think I stuck around the similar field is just because I like it so much. And once you start doing it a lot, you just become other companies just want your talent, your expertise on that field. So for internships, I don't think you should be worried. You could like, it's really not that. But once you start doing, you're in one field for a few years, I think it's kind of like going back to start over from zero might be a little difficult. Yeah.
Very good point, Nadim. On the one hand, software development is software development, and what you do does not really change that much. But on the other hand, people do appreciate that you know the industry terms and that you're able to communicate and that you understand their concerns and you understand the solutions that have been proposed before and why they worked or didn't work. So
exactly, like it's obviously you always want to like grow up in your career, whether it's salary or the title you take on, and the longer you've been in the industry, the easier it is to be on that level. If you restart, you just have to go back, like you start from zero there. It's more of your knowledge. So like internships are a really great way of doing that. Like start off, like you don't have the big commitment. You take 4 months and you're like, by the end, if you don't like it, you don't stick around, or most of the time, if you perform well in an internship, like they will want to hire you. Like there's so much demand out there that like if they find someone good in an internship, they'll like most likely ask you to stay afterwards. So like it's really up to you whether you want to stay there or not.
Absolutely. Next panelist, I'm going to ask Ksenia. Can you describe how your day-to-day is different when you compare your current job to what you're doing day-to-day in your previous engineering life?
Oh yeah, of course. It's completely different because I used to travel a lot for work. I used to work in some like very remote locations. Right now, I'm just in the comfort of my home with my cat, and yeah, it's working remotely. I want to comment a little bit about about how the pandemic has affected like my job and just like a lot of people in my job. So for example, those that some of my previous colleagues in engineering, because the job was so hands-on and you had to travel for work, you had to work on site, you had to do like rotations and shifts. It became practically impossible to do it after the pandemic started. Being a software developer, like it gives you the flexibility to work from home, which gives you this kind of security and in the case where like nobody had any idea this would happen. So yeah, I think a lot more security, and having like having like recruiters like being kind of a field that's really in demand in Montreal and the rest of Canada and the US right now, having kind of a job security. And also seeing like that there's other companies that are constantly hiring, and people that are reaching out to you is a really good feeling, like in this kind of uncertain world and in the phase that we live in. Yeah, and it's just it's great to wake up and have a purpose. Like that's how I see it.
I mean, very good point. We're definitely in demand right now. Well, I mean, I'm an instructor, so I'm not in demand. But you guys are the superstars. Next question is for Ali. So Ali, what do you like most about being a dev? What like gets you up and gets you excited? And because you seem to be really enjoying your occupation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it does the exact same thing that music does, which is when I start coding, nothing else exists all of a sudden. It's I've got kind of a hyper brain and I'm constantly like in the forward or the back, or yeah, coding is like this present moment thing that I can do for like 12 hours and totally forget to eat. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird Zen state that I've only ever achieved on stage before. And when I code and I get into a zone, I feel the exact same thing. And that to me is happiness. Like that's my version of happiness. So
absolutely, you get into that flow, right?
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. You don't feel anything.
Nothing.
You have no worries.
Exactly. And then also you get to feel really cool. I don't know. Coding makes me feel really cool.
Like I can do something that other people can't do.
Yeah, and then I show my musician friends and they think I'm made of magic, which I'm not, but to them I am. And that's all that matters.
Well, you control the magic. The magic's in the computer. You're the wizard.
True. Yeah. Also, it feels like it's a powerful feeling to be able to create something. Like right now, if anyone came up to me and was like, I need to do this startup, I'd be like, okay, we can figure that out. And that is so powerful.
I know, right?
Wild. Yeah.
All these things that we use every day, like Facebook and Airbnb. I mean, with enough resources, the basics of how it works, and you could build something similar, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you probably need a few devs, but.
And I mean, yeah, of course, like it's easy to build like a Facebook, we're not going to go through their quick stuff, but yeah, no, exactly. Like at any moment now, you can, or sorry, once you get to like a certain level, yeah, you can look at anything, figure out how to build it. And then of course you have to think about how it could actually logically scale, which is a whole separate thing. But it is fun. Like that's what I started doing. I started looking at my favorite apps. I was like, okay, I'm going to design Reddit, you know, and I would just find my own ways to design all the apps that I liked just on paper. And yeah, it is really fun. Like,
Absolutely. Totally. I'm totally on board. It is so enjoyable. Next question is for Stephanie.
Well, it's like I raised my hand. I wanted
sorry,
to
go ahead, Ksenia.
hi, Ksenia.
Yeah, hi. No, that's exactly it. And building software is like building something out of like thin air. You know, just building something out of nothing. And when you would think, oh, I'm building something, you always think of like this stack of material, and then you have like something, it comes input and then an output. But with software, there's actually like, it's like thin air. So it is quite magic.
It is absolutely magical what you can do. And you can look at a website and you can say, I could build that. I mean, given enough time, it wouldn't take a week. But yeah, you could build the Gmail, you could build a Tinder, the web version. The mobile version would be more difficult. Next question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, you had a very interesting journey to becoming a dev. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced along the road, and how you faced them and how you overcame them?
Like during the first year of the job, or like leading into the boot camp?
Like learning all that you needed to learn, and maybe the training period on the job.
Okay, yeah. It's definitely an intense experience. I would definitely recommend a boot camp if, obviously, if you're here at this panel, that's probably what you're interested in. It's going to be one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It's a very short amount of time and it's very intense, but it's very rewarding. You're going to be with a bunch of other people that have various levels of experience. So I know someone earlier had asked whether or not it mattered if you had any previous experience with coding, and no, it doesn't. I was in a cohort with a few people that had never even touched HTML, but then we also were with someone that was a 10 years C# dev that was basically just learning React. So you'll be put up against a whole bunch of different people, and you have to prioritize working on your own stuff without getting too caught up in the weeds of comparing yourself with other people. And that's a huge challenge mentally, is just making sure that you're learning enough for yourself. And then afterwards, it's a definite hustle. Like, you will be unemployed and you will have to look for a job. But I found for me, it was actually very inspiring because it was the first time I had ever had, like, I think at one point, so I got my job about a month after the boot camp, and I had interviewed with 8 different companies, which was mind-blowing to me, because within the marketing industry, you would maybe be lucky for 1 or 2 jobs in the field to come up a year, and then if that, getting the interview, whether or not it's like taking out language or anything like that. So that was really refreshing. So while it's difficult process, it's also, yeah, I guess a little bit simpler in that sense. And then basically, again, just kind of managing the expectations. I was the first person at Transit hired that had been in a boot camp, so I was also kind of a test subject. And my manager told me after my probationary period that they were kind of looking at it as a little bit of an experiment to see whether or not, like, they had never experienced working with someone from a boot camp. So that was kind of interesting. And I'm also the only woman on my team as well. So the company's been amazing, but it definitely was something that, you kind of like worry about, but everybody's been super awesome. It was super easy to learn. Like, the company is about 50 people. So while it's not a massive company, it's big enough that they had us like a type of onboarding process, and peer programming every other day with my teammates and things like that. So while it is a huge learning curve and you will feel frustrated sometimes, it definitely is rewarding. And I mean, you know, 2 years into it, I'm still learning new things, and I'll probably be learning new things like 20 years from now, because everything changes so quickly. Like you know, you start off using one type of React and now you're on Next.js and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely an evolving field.
Absolutely. Always something to learn. If you love learning, I love learning, which is why I'm an instructor. I also love teaching. It's definitely a very, very fun and rewarding field. We have a question from Claire. Before I read the question, disclaimer, well, not disclaimer, but promotion, self-promotion. McGill is going to offer a boot camp starting in the summer. So we're in the planning phases. Planning phase is going to start at the end of May. So wait for news about that. Very excited to launch a bootcamp. Claire asks, and this is the reason I gave this information, is because it's related to Claire's question. Claire asks, is a bootcamp worth money? Can you learn the same stuff on your own? I'm going to give this question to Ziad because he's probably the person best positioned to answer it. Ziad?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was on mute. It's a very difficult question, because you know, you're asking someone else to try to put value on something, and we don't all value the same things. So I can, you know, I think we can all give you some hints, but I think the most important for you to figure out if it's worth it to you is to analyze what are your goals and how fast you want to reach those goals, but also what kind of learner you are. And also at the end of the day, it also matters what is your budget and what are your means, you know. There's a lot of things that matter, and can you spend that time, you know, can you dedicate all that time? There's so many variables, and I think it's a very personal question. I think maybe the most interesting part that we can talk about together is the second part of your question. Can you learn the same stuff on your own? Yes, you can learn the same stuff on your own. Like when I started, like even the internet wasn't that big. Like there was nothing. Like I had to go to the library literally, and I had to like get books on like PHP and HTML and all that. There was no boot camp. And like I'm not doing so bad right now. Like I'm pretty good. It took me maybe more time than some people who take a boot camp and kind of like fast track their way through the process. So you can learn the same stuff on your own, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And if you do that, you're still gonna sometimes end up paying some money. You know, there are a lot of free resources that are available out there, and some of them are maybe more or less organized. I know that there are a lot of people that came to the boot camp that I was teaching at, and that told us that they were going into the boot camp for not necessarily for learning what they could learn on their own, but for all the other aspects, like the networking aspect or the job placement aspect, for example, or simply to be on the hook for succeeding. Like they would put up that amount of money, and they would sort of like it becomes like that you something that you have to dedicate yourself to. You know, it's like you're putting something on the line, and you're also with other people, so you're also putting sort of like your not your reputation, but you know, people want to succeed, and when you're with a group of people, it makes that feeling even stronger. So no, it's not necessary. It's not for everyone. It works. If you do it, for a lot of people, it works, and it works really well. And I hope that that's a good start to answer your question.
A very clear and precise and nuanced answer for a very difficult question. Education is a very personal thing. Different people have different expectations, as you just said. Different people have different priorities. So you really need to know a person, and you need to know yourself well to be able to answer that question. However, Ali has another perspective, which is that she absolutely needed the bootcamp. Would you like to talk a little bit about why you absolutely needed the bootcamp and what my training did for you?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I like, you know, I hadn't learned anything new in like 8 years. I'm not lying. Like, I started the boot camp in my 30s, and I kind of almost forgot how to learn something new. And I remember Jacques' like first presentation was about how anyone can still learn. And I almost like cried in the bathroom. But yeah, that was it. I needed people around to direct what I was learning. You know, like when I looked online at the idea of learning how to code, it was so overwhelming. It was just so overwhelming. I was like, I'll never be able to learn all of this. I don't know where to start. And I was in my 30s, you know, I don't have a lot of time. So yeah, an 8-week boot camp was kind of perfect. Like, yes, it's a lot of money, and yes, it's an intense time frame to learn a lot of stuff, but I met Ksenia there, you know, and we talk about code all the time still. I like made a lot of good connections. And then there's also that, like, not a negative competitive energy, but there is kind of a competitive energy. And I learn when I'm around that. I just do. And then it's also, yeah, having these really good instructors that you can ask questions to when you're stuck and when Google's not quite giving you what you want. So yeah, I highly recommend it. I definitely understand it's not for everyone. And when I have friends who want to learn how to code and they have a lot of time, or they want to learn it on the side of what they're doing, then I'll suggest like Saab or something a little lengthier, that's a little less intense and maybe less expensive. But if you want to get your career going like quickly, yeah, boot camps are definitely the best, in my opinion.
So we have the perspective from Ziad, who was an instructor at Decode Montreal, and we have the perspective from someone who was a student at Decode Montreal. So nice varied perspectives. We have a question from Lila. I have very strong opinion. I have very strong opinion about this question, but I'm going to give it to somebody else because I'm supposed to be an impartial host.
I typed an answer in the chat.
So Ziad types an answer. Let me read. So go ahead, Ziad. Sorry.
So the question was, because you didn't mention what the question was. I noticed for most, if not all, web developer interviews, they still ask algorithm and data structure questions. Do you guys find that a fair way to assess how web developers would perform at their jobs, or is it outdated? And the gist of my answer is it will never be outdated, because it's at the root of everything. And it affects everything. Like everything, like the whole point of what we do is basically to process data at the end of the day. And that data is stored in data structures, and you need algorithms in order to operate on those data structures. And these days, there is a lot of libraries that allow you to do a lot of things, but even when you're using those libraries, that just means that you're manipulating higher and higher level data structures, and you still need to do operations on those data structures. And that's whether you work in networking or in front end or in back end or in anything. So most importantly, because algorithms and data structures are so generic, I will always incorporate them as part of an interview, because they will allow me to assess someone's logical thinking and collaboration. Like I will work together with someone on an algorithm and data structure problem, and I'll encourage them to share what they're thinking and to work together on it. And that will give me a lot of insight on, on that person's abilities. But like anything, it won't be the only factor. I also know that when you come to an interview, you're already very stressed, and asking you to do a logic problem, and putting you on the spot for it. I know you probably, studied for it, and maybe you didn't sleep the night before. So there's so many factors to take into account. But I think past interviews, just if you're going to do any serious software development, you need to have a solid foundation in algorithms and data structures. So I'm also biased.
You are biased, but you're also very wise. So we will forgive your bias. Because you have the experience to back it up. So we have 3 more minutes in the session. I'll just wrap up by answering the remaining questions in the chat and then thanking our wonderful panelists. We have one question: what is the approximate cost of the program? Camilo, I think you are talking about the McGill bootcamp, which is happening in the summer. It's going to be about $10,000. Next question. Oh, no other questions? Oh, how can I prepare for the programming aptitude test for the bootcamp, or also for the part-time program? The answer is you can. It's a memory test. It's a cognitive test. you just have to take it. There's a little preparation inside the test that's included, but you cannot study for it because it's a memory test. Layla asks, do web developers design the UI they're developing, or do they just implement the UI UX designers work on? I guess it probably depends on if your team has a UI designer. I'm going to give this last question to Nadim.
Obviously, like the last part is makes more sense. It depends on the company you work for. For example, the team I work with, we do have UI UX engineers who are dedicated to building. We have like a UI toolkit that we build. That team is responsible for building that UI toolkit, and we use those toolkits. That's just really depends on how your team is structured. But a lot of the time, if you're a smaller company, you'll do pretty much everything from the back end to the front end to the UI UX. It's really it really depends on your team size and expertise.
Absolutely, depends on the company, depends on your expertise. From my experience, for the companies I worked for, there were separate jobs, and thank God, because developers, me included, we're not the best designers. But hey, some devs are. Some devs are. I'm sure, Stephanie, I've seen your design work, and it's quite nice. So on that note, it is now 7 p.m. I'm going to thank all the wonderful panelists. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. If you have any more questions, feel free to just reach out to me. McGill University, we teach full stack web development, so we are a resource if you need one. Once again, thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. So
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.